The hum of my laptop was a low, persistent drone, the only sound cutting through the 2 a.m. stillness. It cast an eerie blue light on the empty space beside me, Claire's space. The side of the bed where she should have been. My fingers froze over the keyboard, her words from dinner echoing in my skull, a broken record I couldn't turn off. Kelly, Ryan needs you. I need you. It was a plea, delivered with that soft, almost pleading tone she used when she was about to ask for something big, or to say something I didn't want to hear. But deadlines don't give a damn about feelings, right? One more hour wouldn't hurt. My shoulders tightened, a knot forming between my shoulder blades as I heard footsteps outside the door. Liam. Always Liam. He was a shadow, always there, always watching. The kid was like a damn sensor, picking up on everything. I saw his worried eyes through the crack of the door. He lingered there a moment, his small frame a silhouette against the dim hallway light before he padded away, a whisper of bare feet on the carpet. The house creaked around us, amplifying the silence, a living, breathing thing full of unspoken words. A muffled sob, thin and desperate, drifted from Ryan's room, and my gut clenched like a fist. It was like someone had punched me in the stomach. Claire's voice, soft and soothing, like a gentle rain on parched earth, seeped through the walls. She was doing my job, the job I was supposed to be doing. My son was drowning. I knew it. I saw the water rising around him, but I kept pretending I didn't. The school calls, they'd become a regular thing, more frequent now, about the bullying, and I'd wave them off. Boys will be boys, I'd say, my voice full of a confidence that was a complete and utter lie. He'll toughen up. The next morning at breakfast, Ryan's knuckles were bruised, knuckles he quickly shoved under his sleeve. Defensive wounds. His eyes met mine for a split second, pleading, begging for something, anything. But I was already late, my mind racing with spreadsheets, deadlines, presentations, and I mumbled something about being late for the office, focusing on stirring my coffee, stirring it way too much. Claire's fork clattered against the ceramic of her plate, the sound sharp, cutting through the forced civility of the morning, the unnatural silence we all walked on like eggshells. Dad. Ryan's voice cracked, a thin, fragile sound. His 15-year-old frame hunched over his untouched bowl of cereal, a bowl of cereal that looked just as unappetizing as the past few mornings. Mr. Carter thinks I should join the counseling group. Counseling. A word that had always made me bristle. Counseling meant problems. Problems meant time. Time I didn't have. My grip tightened on my briefcase, the leather creaking in protest. You don't need counseling, son. You just need to toughen up a bit. The words were out before I could catch them, and I could see them hanging in the air, ugly, jagged, cutting right through my son. Claire's sharp intake of breath made me wince, a tiny sound that had an outsized effect. Liam, ever the observer, slid closer to his brother, his small hand reaching out, finding Ryan's under the table, offering some small, quiet comfort that I couldn't even muster. Claire moved between us, a wall of righteous anger, her eyes burning. Kelly, Mr. Carter says Ryan's been eating lunch alone in his classroom. He's trying to help. And when she said the teacher's name, her voice changed. A softness, a warmth that I hadn't heard in months. Something that sounded like something. I brushed it off, my mind already back at the office. The morning's presentations, the numbers, the never-ending numbers, too preoccupied to even register the warning signs flashing like neon in my face. My life, the perfect life I'd built, it was cracking, breaking under the pressure, and all I did was slap another layer of paint over the damage. Patch, patch, patch. Every morning, I'd stare into the mirror, straightening my tie, rehearsing the day's pitches, the right combination of buzzwords, sales phrases, all the while ignoring the shadows under my eyes, The exhaustion etched into my face. Success. It had always been my compass, the needle pointing steadily toward the next promotion, the next validation that I was doing everything right, even when everything was going wrong. That evening, rummaging for my missing tie in the laundry room, I found Ryan's journal hidden under a pile of clothes. The pages were filled with dark sketches, angry scribbles, words that made my chest ache. Nobody sees. Nobody cares. Dad's never here. I should have stopped then, canceled my meetings, put down the damn phone, been the father he needed. But instead, I tucked the journal away, like a dirty secret, pretending I'd never seen it, like if I ignored it long enough, it wouldn't be real. Later, I watched Claire console Ryan through the crack of his bedroom door. Her voice hushed, her words a balm to his pain, and I heard her whisper, "At least Mr. Carter understands." The words stung, a dull ache in my chest, but I pushed it aside like I always did. Success meant sacrifice, I told myself, the mantra I'd been repeating for years. The promotion was just around the corner. Everything would be better then, once I made partner, once I got the corner office. The house was silent, except for the sound of the kids' quiet sobs and Claire's gentle shushing. The perfect family, the perfect life I was building was falling apart, and I was too damn blind, too damn scared to admit it. But that night, lying awake, the silence so thick it was a physical thing pressing down on me, listening to Claire cry softly in the bathroom, I realized I was losing them, all of them. My phone buzzed with another work email, its harsh light illuminating the family photo on my nightstand. A perfect family, smiling, frozen in a moment where we were whole, where everything still made sense. Now, every ping of my phone felt like another brick in the wall I'd built between us. Claire's side of the bed remained empty, cold, untouched, her pillow a monument to her absence. The sound of her comforting Ryan drifted through the walls, punctuated by his muffled cries. The distance between us had grown into a chasm, and I didn't have a damn clue how to build a bridge across it. The first signs were like whispers, so quiet I almost missed them. Claire's phone would light up more often during dinner, her fingers hovering over the screen before she'd flip it face down. The movement quick, almost guilty. "Just work stuff," she'd say. But her smile, it was different, lighter, like she was holding on to a secret that made her float a little above the ground. It started with parent-teacher conferences. Claire insisted on going alone, her tone light but firm, saying I was too busy anyway, and she wasn't wrong. The Wilson account had me by the throat, consuming my days. Most nights I barely made it home before the kids were already tucked in bed. When she'd come back from these meetings, her cheeks would be flushed, her eyes bright with a spark I hadn't seen in years. That spark I used to see when we were first dating, before real life crashed down on us. "Mr. Carter really gets what Ryan's going through," she'd say, her voice taking on that special, almost soft warmth whenever she mentioned his name. "He says Ryan's making progress." I'd nod, half listening, my thumbs scrolling through emails on my phone, missing the way her fingers would twist her wedding ring, a nervous habit she'd developed recently. She looked at me when I did not look at her. Liam, he noticed things I didn't. He always did. One evening I found him standing in the doorway of my home office, his small frame casting a long, skinny shadow across the carpet. "Mommy's different," he said. His voice hushed, his eyes serious beyond his years. "She laughs more now, but not with us." I waved it off, ruffling his hair, promising to play catch later. A promise I knew I wouldn't keep, because I never did. Then Claire changed more obviously. After winter, it was like someone had flipped a switch. She started wearing perfume again, something light and floral that brought back memories of our early dating days. A scent that was both familiar and strangely foreign. Her wardrobe shifted, subtle changes, nothing dramatic, just a little more effort, a touch more color, a slight curve in her silhouette that had been hidden before. "I'm just trying to take care of myself," she'd say when I finally noticed enough to comment, and there was an edge to her words, a challenge that I chose to ignore. The school's parent-teacher night stretched later than usual, and when Claire came home, she moved with a lightness I hadn't seen in months. "Mr. Carter suggested some books for Ryan," she announced, pulling out a list, handwritten with neat, precise cursive. Her fingers traced the letters, and I saw she'd reapplied her lipstick, the color a little bolder than usual. The observation flickered. A tiny spark, then died, extinguished by my phone buzzing with another urgent email. "That's great," I mumbled, not even looking up from the screen. My mind already back at work, back with the spreadsheets, back with the numbers. Did he say anything about the bullying? Claire paused, a beat too long, the silence heavy, finally forcing me to look up. She was staring at me, and her eyes held a mixture of disappointment and something else, something that looked a hell of a lot like resignation. "He actually did, Kelly. He's been letting Ryan eat lunch in his classroom, giving him a safe space." Her voice softened, that warm, almost tender tone again. "James, Mr. Carter. He really listens. He sees what's happening with our son." The first name usage should have been a red flag, but the Wilson account was a damn siren, constantly calling me back, demanding my attention, and I was too damn preoccupied to notice, to even think. Besides, wasn't this what we wanted? Someone helping our son while I focused on providing for our family? That was my job, wasn't it? Days blurred into weeks. Claire started volunteering at school events that I was too busy to attend. She'd come home with stories about the drama club Mr. Carter supervised, about the way he handled the kids, the way he handled difficult students, about his innovative teaching methods. And each story was punctuated with "James says" or "James thinks." I didn't even realize I was becoming a stranger in my own marriage. Liam's drawings, they changed during this time. Where he once sketched our family of 4 holding hands, now his pictures showed Claire standing apart, often with a shadowy figure lurking nearby. When I asked him about it, he shrugged, his eyes avoiding mine. "That's Mr. Carter," he said in a whisper, a barely audible sound. "He makes Mommy smile more than you do." The words landed like a punch to the gut, but I swallowed them down with my coffee and headed to work, telling myself it was nothing, telling myself the kid was just being a kid. That evening, I found Claire's phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. The screen lit up with a text. "Thanks for today. Your support means everything. James." My fingers hovered over the message, but I locked the screen instead. "Trust," I told myself. Trust was the foundation of our marriage. But the foundation, it was cracking, splitting apart like a fault line. Claire started coming home later, claiming school committee meetings and parent support groups. Her excuses, they were perfect, reasonable. She was just being involved in our son's education. Yet something felt off, in the way she'd check her phone when she thought no one was watching, in how she'd step outside to take calls, in the way her smile would fade whenever I entered the room. The spark would die, like an ember fading into ash. The truth had been there all along, written in the spaces between her words, in the perfume that lingered on her clothes, in the way she stopped reaching for me at night. I just couldn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. After all, admitting there was a problem would mean facing my own role in creating it, facing all the ways I had failed her, failed my family. It took Liam, with his kid's brutal honesty, to finally make me see. "Daddy?" he asked one night as I tucked him in, his small voice quiet, his brow furrowed with confusion. "Why does Mommy look at Mr. Carter the way she used to look at you?" The question hung in the air, thick and heavy, choking me with its implications, its painful truth. That night, lying awake, actually thinking about Claire for the first time in months, I realized I couldn't remember the last time she'd told me about her day, her dreams, her fears. I'd lost her long before Mr. Carter found her. I'd been so focused on success that I forgot what real success was. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between the junk mail and bills like they were just another piece of routine correspondence, like an advertisement for a new credit card or a flyer for a pizza place. My coffee went cold as I stared at the words, irreconcilable differences, the legal phrase somehow inadequate to describe the demolition of 15 years of marriage. 15 years that felt like a lifetime that had just been tossed in the trash like a used tissue. Claire had signed her name with the same elegant, looping cursive I'd once admired on the love notes she used to leave in my briefcase, notes that now felt like ghosts, haunting me with their memory. The house was silent, as quiet as a tomb. Ryan had stopped coming down for breakfast weeks ago, the silence amplified by his absence, and Liam's usual chatter had dwindled to whispered responses, his voice barely above a breath. I could hear Claire moving upstairs, packing more of her things, the sound of her footsteps, once so familiar, now like Morse code tapping out a message I was too damn late to decode. I need you to sign them by Friday, she said from the doorway, her voice steady, controlled, like she was reciting a line she had rehearsed 100 times. She looked different, somehow lighter, like she'd already shed the weight of our marriage. James thinks. Don't. The word was sharper than I intended, a clipped, angry sound. Don't tell me what he thinks. My hand shook, a tremor I couldn't control, as I reached for my phone, scrolling through the email from Marshall Investigations. The photos were attached, the evidence I'd suspected but hadn't wanted to confirm. Claire and Mr. Carter in various innocent-looking encounters that added up to something far from it. Coffee shop meetings that stretched for hours, those stolen moments captured on grainy film. Long walks in the park, the kind of walks we used to take when we were in love, now stolen by someone else. His hand on her shoulder, lingering too long to be professional, a gesture that made my blood boil. But it was the school security footage that truly gutted me. Claire, staying late after parent-teacher meetings, her head thrown back, laughing at something he'd said, her face alive, bright with an animation I hadn't seen in me, the way they moved around each other in his classroom, a dance of calculated distance that fooled everyone but the camera's unblinking eye. You want to know what I think? I spread the photos across the kitchen counter, the glossy prints like a twisted card game. I think you've been lying to everyone, including yourself. Claire's face drained of color, the blood rushing from her cheeks as she looked at the proof of her betrayal, her fingers trembling as she picked up one photo after another, like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. You had me followed? Her voice cracked, a fragile sound, a thin piece of glass breaking. This is exactly why, Kelly, you treat everything like a business transaction. Even our marriage was just another deal to close. Ryan appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face hard, his expression like a steel trap as he took in the scene. More fighting? He spat. Great, real mature. Before either of us could respond, he grabbed his backpack and slammed the front door, the sound echoing through the house like a gunshot. Through the window, I watched him hunch his shoulders, trying to shield himself from the world, the weight of the morning weighing him down. The private investigator's report burned in my pocket, a live coal against my skin. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. There were rumors about Mr. Carter, whispers from other parents about inappropriate attention to certain students, a pattern of behavior, a predator hiding in plain sight. The thought made my stomach turn, the bile rising in my throat. I'd hired the PI expecting to find evidence of infidelity, not some goddamn potential predator, a monster preying on vulnerable families. There's more, I said, my voice barely recognizable. A low, guttural sound. Things about Carter that you need to know. But Claire was already backing away, shaking her head, her defensive walls visibly rising. The armor she wore, the armor I'd seen her put on again and again. I don't want to hear your accusations. James has been more present for this family in the past few months than you've been in years. The words landed like physical blows, each one exposing the truth of my failures, while simultaneously stoking a rage I didn't know I possessed. A rage that burned hot, a rage I needed to control. I watched her leave for school, knowing she was heading straight to him, knowing she would run right into the arms of a monster. The divorce papers sat on the counter, waiting for my signature. But all I could focus on was the growing certainty that this wasn't just about saving my marriage anymore. It was about protecting my family from something far worse than I'd initially imagined. It was about protecting my kids from a predator. I spent weeks planning my revenge, meticulously cataloging Claire's possessions and uncovering every secret she thought was safe. Each item, each detail, was like a piece of a puzzle that would reveal a truth she tried to hide. The movers would arrive at 9, precisely when the school day began, a time calculated to maximize the impact. Everything had been arranged with the same meticulous attention I gave to corporate takeovers, every detail accounted for, every contingency planned. I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom now, surrounded by labeled boxes. 15 years of marriage condensed into cardboard containers. Claire's jewelry, Claire's books, Claire's winter clothes. Each box represented another betrayal, another lie, each one a physical reminder of the life we built and the way she had destroyed it. I'd found love letters tucked into old journals, hidden behind the false bottom of her desk drawer, letters filled with lies. Mr. Carter's flowery words about destiny and soulmates, the kind of saccharine sweet nonsense that made my stomach turn, the kind of drivel that had convinced her to throw it all away. I checked my watch again, squinting against the morning sun through the curtains. 8:45. Claire had left early for a faculty meeting. Her goodbye to the boys rushed and distracted. The kind of goodbye you gave to people you didn't really care about. Liam had watched her go with knowing eyes, his gaze sharp, his little face grave, while Ryan hadn't even looked up from his phone, already tuned out, already gone. The fractures in our family, they were growing, becoming chasms that seemed impossible to cross. The movers arrived right on schedule, their truck backing into our driveway with practiced precision. The sound of the air breaks a sharp, guttural sigh. I handed them the detailed inventory I'd prepared, along with Mr. Carter's home address, an address I'd memorized. Each number burned into my brain like a brand. Everything needs to be delivered by noon, I instructed, my voice steady despite the thunder in my chest, the anger burning like a wildfire. His wife should be home to receive the delivery. Box after box disappeared into the truck, each one a symbol of a broken promise. Claire's vanity mirror, still bearing sticky notes with her daily affirmations that now seemed like a twisted joke. The expensive perfumes she'd started wearing again when the affair began, each scent a reminder of the betrayal. Photos of our family vacations, now tainted by the knowledge that she'd been planning her escape even then. Her wedding dress, preserved in its special box, went last. A symbolic finale to our marriage, a final act of destruction in our story. I found myself standing in her empty closet, running my fingers along the bare hangers, the wire cold and empty. The space felt vast and hollow, like the pit in my stomach. The space where she used to be, where she used to hang her clothes, where she used to exist in my world. For a moment, doubt crept in, a tiny worm burrowing into my conscience. Was this too far? Too cruel? Then I remembered the photos of them together, her laughter echoing in his classroom after hours, her hand on his arm. The looks on their faces, and the doubt hardened into resolve, the worm turning into a viper, ready to strike. Mrs. Carter would be getting quite a surprise. That much was certain. I'd made sure to include the evidence of the affair. Photos, texts I'd recovered, every incriminating detail, along with Claire's belongings, a complete and utter package of devastation. Let her see exactly who her husband really was, the man who had destroyed my family. 2 marriages would end today, not just one. I sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open to track the delivery truck's progress, the blinking cursor mocking my intent. Each mile marker brought me closer to the moment when my plan would detonate their carefully constructed fantasy, a fantasy built on lies, on deception. My phone buzzed, a text from the moving company. Delivery in progress. I imagined Mrs. Carter's face as she opened her door to find her husband's mistress's life packed in neat boxes on her doorstep, the carefully constructed facade crumbling before her eyes. The first call came at 12:17. Carter's home phone number flashed on my screen. I'd expected this, had been waiting for it. I let it ring through to voicemail, imagining her voice shaking with rage as she pieced together the truth about her perfect husband, the reality of the man she thought she knew, a man who had destroyed everything. The second call came from Claire at 12:22. I watched it ring, remembering how she used to call me during lunch breaks, those stolen moments when we used to talk before Mr. Carter became her confidant, before her secrets, before everything fell apart. At 1:14, the front door slammed open, the sound like a physical blow. Claire stood there, mascara streaking her cheeks, her professional composure shattered, the mask slipping, the facade crumbling. "What have you done?" Her voice cracked like thin ice, the controlled composure she tried to maintain completely shattered. "How could you?" "I simply delivered your things to where you spend most of your time anyway," I replied, my tone carefully measured, the words cold, rehearsed, each syllable sharpened like a blade. "Mrs. Carter seemed quite interested in your collection of love letters." "You had no right." She stormed up the stairs, her heels echoing against the hardwood, each step a thud in the silence. I followed, watching as she threw open her closet doors only to find empty space, the gaping void a mirror of the emptiness she had created. "This is insane, Kelly. You've lost your mind." "No, Claire. I've finally found clarity." I leaned against the doorframe, watching her panic rise, a slow, insidious burn. Every item, every memory, it's all where it belongs now. With your lover and his wife. Her phone rang again. Mrs. Carter's number, an insistent, demanding ring that couldn't be ignored. Claire's hands shook as she declined the call, like she was afraid of the truth it contained. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "James's marriage, his career, his predatory behavior," I cut in, pulling out the PI's full report, the evidence I had gathered, a collection of damning details. "Did you know about the other students, Claire? The pattern of special attention he gives to vulnerable families?" The color drained from her face as she scanned the pages, her eyes darting across the details, her face a mask of disbelief and growing horror. "These are lies," she whispered, but doubt had already crept into her voice, her denial a shaky facade. "You're trying to manipulate me. The school board receives their copy tomorrow." I watched her world crumble, feeling nothing but a hollow satisfaction, a bitter taste in my mouth. "You should have chosen your savior more carefully." Claire sank onto the bare mattress, the report trembling in her hands, the reality of what she had done, the truth of who he was, finally sinking in. Her phone kept buzzing. Mrs. Carter's fury wouldn't be silenced. A storm that was about to break. "I loved him," she said softly. more to herself than to me. A whisper in the empty room. He understood me. He understood how to exploit a failing marriage. I corrected, my voice sharp, devoid of any sympathy, just like he's done before. The sound of the front door opening downstairs made us both freeze, both of us suddenly aware of the outside world, a world that we had so carefully kept at bay. Ryan's voice drifted up, his voice laced with confusion. "Mom? Dad? Why is there a moving truck at Mr. Carter's house?" Claire's eyes met mine, panic replacing anger, a realization that this was bigger than just us, bigger than just her affair, bigger than just my revenge. In that moment, I saw the full weight of consequences crash down on her. This wasn't just about us anymore. Our son would have to face the fallout at school, the whispers, the stares, the judgment. "I'll talk to him," I said, my voice softening slightly, a flicker of empathy, a small spark that made its way through the ashes of my anger. "You should answer Mrs. Carter's calls. She deserves the truth, don't you think?" As I left the room, Claire's phone rang again, the insistent buzz a constant reminder of the devastation. I heard her answer with a shaking voice. "Sandra, please let me explain." I closed the door on her plea, feeling neither triumph nor relief. Revenge, I was learning, tasted nothing like victory. It just left ashes in your mouth and emptiness in your heart. After the divorce, our house became a shrine to our former life, a mausoleum of broken dreams. Empty spaces on the walls, where family photos once hung, became monuments to our loss, to a life that was no more. Ryan refused to sit at the dinner table, taking his meals to his room in silent protest, a barricade against us, against me. Only Liam remained, pushing food around his plate, his eyes darting between his brother's empty chair and mine, his small face a mask of worry, his silence a rebuke. "He'll come around, Dad," Liam would say, his voice small but hopeful, trying to fill the heavy silence with a faith I didn't deserve. But Ryan's anger, it had roots deeper than the divorce, and I knew it. Every morning, he'd leave for school without a word, shoulders hunched against more than just his backpack's weight. The weight of the world, the weight of my mistakes. The bullying had stopped. Mr. Carter's spectacular fall from grace had seen to that. The predator was gone, but the cost, it was written in my son's contempt, in the way he looked at me, like I was nothing. One evening, I found Ryan's college application essays scattered across his desk, the papers a mess of handwritten notes and crossed-out sentences. The prompt asked about overcoming challenges. His words cut through me like glass, a sharp, jagged edge that pierced my heart. I learned early that the people meant to protect you can become the ones who hurt you most. My father taught me that lesson when he chose revenge over our family's healing. The truth in those words, it haunted me. Those words were a constant reminder of my failures, of the damage I had done. I'd been so focused on exposing Claire's betrayal, on bringing down Mr. Carter, that I'd forgotten about the collateral damage, the lives I had ruined in my quest for justice. The satisfaction of taking down the predator, of seeing him exposed, had faded, leaving only the bitter taste of Pyrrhic victory, a victory that had cost me everything that mattered. The predator was gone, but so was my son's trust, my family's love. Liam, he tried to bridge the gap, trying to mend the broken bond between Ryan and me, playing messenger between his brother and me, his small attempts at reconciliation, a reminder of what we had lost. Ryan said he got an A on his history test. He'd report over breakfast, a small piece of good news delivered with a hopeful tone, or he's thinking about joining the debate team. Each scrap of information, a lifeline I clung to. Proof that my son still existed beyond the wall of silence between us, beyond the bitterness and resentment. Some nights, I'd stand in the doorway of Ryan's room, watching him sleep, his face soft, His features relaxed, finally free from the anger and resentment that consumed him when he was awake. In those moments, he looked like my little boy again, not the angry teenager who wore betrayal like armor, whose pain was a direct reflection of my own failures. I'd think about Claire then, wonder if she'd found the peace she claimed I'd denied her, the escape she so desperately craved. The last I'd heard, she'd moved to another state, leaving behind the wreckage of 2 families and a career in ruins, a broken life left in her wake. "Did you have to destroy everything?" Ryan had asked me once in a rare moment of direct confrontation, his voice raw, his eyes full of pain. "Couldn't you have just let her go?" I had no answer that would satisfy him, because I didn't have an answer that would satisfy me. How could I explain that in trying to protect our family from one thread, I'd become another, a destructive force tearing everything apart? How could I tell him that in winning the battle, I'd lost something far more precious than my marriage? I'd lost my son's faith in me. I'd destroyed everything I loved in my desperate attempt to fix it. Now, each day feels like an exercise in redemption I'm not sure I deserve. Each day a reminder of my failings, my mistakes. Liam still believes in happy endings, his innocence a beacon of hope. But Ryan's silence reminds me that some bridges, once burned, leave scars on both shores, scars that may never heal, wounds that may never close. My actions had consequences, and I had to live with them. This was my penance.